just wanted to hear from you, like, what do you think? What's your sense of how did he arrive here?
Well, we go back to the breakdowns that turn into breakthroughs.
Mm-hmm.
And he had the magic number 3 is always a good number to start with. He had 3 breakdowns. He lost his oldest son in World War One, and he was smart enough to see World War One for the absolute insanity that it was. Start to finish, top to bottom, was just pure insanity. And he lost his child in this war, and his child was brilliant too, but was killed senselessly in the trenches. And at the same time, he's sitting in Cambridge working on the single most important mathematical textbook of the 20th century. It is the textbook that every physicist who ever came up with any kind of quantum physics insight, that textbook was the one they learned mathematics from. And it was called Principia Mathematica. And it laid the foundation for how to do math so that you can do work with very, very complex, giant sets of numbers. So you're leaving Newtonian, Euclidean sense of math as a straightforward enterprise, and you're going into the quantum. The word physics actually had not been invented yet, and ways to conceptualize almost infinite, well, essentially infinite numbers all at one time. And so it was basically he's talking about set theory. So Whitehead was not a philosopher. He never called himself a philosopher. He was a mathematician with a capital M. And his writing partner was his student, Bertrand Russell. And it's very interesting to see the two paths that those two men took. Bertrand Russell laid the foundations for analytical philosophy, which is the rational logic is going to give us all of our answers. And that's also called Anglo-European philosophy, Anglo-American philosophy, excuse me, as opposed to continental philosophy, which is what we think of as the Romantics and Hegel and Heidegger. So at the end of publishing that work, he had the third thing happen to him, which was that he did the absolute unthinkable. He quit his job at the premier university in the world, where he had an absolutely gold standard seat at the table, permanent for the rest of his life. And in Cambridge University would not allow women to attend. And he stood up and said, that just makes no sense. They're human beings. They're intelligent. They can contribute just like any other human being who are also known as male. And this makes no sense. And he quit his job over that issue. And people don't talk about that. But at the same time as he did that, he had been circling around, going back to the initial question, why did this happen to my son? Why did this senselessness take this brilliant human being out of the cosmos and take him away, not just from me, but from all of us? He read through that giant library that you talked about. He threw it away. He came to the end of all of his reading, and it was religion and philosophy and history, and he went all over everything and read everything. And on almost the same day that he quit his job from Cambridge, he sold his library. He said, this is all useless. It does not answer the question that I know is out there based on my work in mathematics. So he did the hard thing and went and found another job, and it was horrible, and he lived through 10 years of essentially being unemployed, as the greatest mind on the face of the planet. But he ended up at Harvard, and because William James saw his potential and invited him, along with another group of people, invited him to Harvard, gave him a seat and a salary, and some students to bounce his ideas off of. And that's where he finished the great work, Process and Reality, which is the philosophical work. He has quite a few other works that are important too, but Process and Reality lays out process philosophy, which is not the name he gave it. He gave it the name organismic philosophy, bless his heart. But it was that the universe is based on experience and not on substance, that there is no such thing as substance, which means that there is no such thing as time, and there is no such thing as spatial relationship. I'm over here and you're over there. I'm in time exclusively in the now moment. The past is always past and the future is always future. We're on a timeline. He said none of that makes any sense. It's mathematical in the old sense of the word, but it is not quantum. It's not it does not work to actually explain experience as we know it. But if you reverse yourself and begin to think of all things as constantly experiencing themselves into being, and that there is no self as a defined, I am here, you are over there, but that every self is a cascade of selves within me. Right now, my belly is doing something. I don't even know what it's doing, but it's making me be able to talk to you right now. It's a very important part of this conversation because if it began to act up, I wouldn't be able to talk to you right now, but I can't control it. In addition to the fact that I am a very tiny part of a very large, scintillating, experiencing moment that's coming together that I'm just a part of, but not just because I don't end somewhere and the other thing starts to begin somewhere else. I am spread throughout this moment, and the choices that I make, consciously or unconsciously, are important to all of the rest of it. That blows your mind. Every choice that I make has repercussions throughout the edge of the cosmos. They can be small and trivial, but they're still there. And I don't know which one of my decisions is suddenly going to become large and consequential. So am I going to enter into this moment as a narrow, self-involved, it's only for me, that destabilizes the whole system? Or am I going to strengthen and strengthen and strengthen and enlarge and enlarge and enlarge myself so that I can begin to consciously make good choices toward this larger good that's happening around, in, and through me all at the same time? And I have to make these choices anyway, and it's scary. And I know that the choices that I make are going to have repercussions. But what if I'm also strong enough to live out into those repercussions with better abilities to make better choices? Small step, small step, small step. Fail gracefully. Have things be non-catastrophic. Try to work toward that good. Increase my sensibility of what is good. And this is where I diverge a little. I don't think it's a great divergence based on what I think he meant by the word God. He used the word God to talk about that large, almost infinite consciousness that's pulling things together every moment and making everything work out, weaving it all together. And I started making a typo, and I realized that it was a Freudian slip. I started typing it as good when I was typing my dissertation. And I stepped back one day, I said, wait a minute, that's not a typo. That's
Mhm.
really what he meant, because the key word, and he called it concrescence. It's a concressing, things, all things come together in each moment. All things come together, create a unity that cascades out into the next moment, that's going to then itself create another unity. And there's unities within unities within unities, going large and going small. And that all of that togetherness and unification is happening around a dynamic that he called joy. That is, an enjoyment is the thing that is pulling everything together. I can enjoy the universe from my own small, narrow, just about me point of view, but that's enjoyment. Or I can enjoy the universe as, wow, I have enormous responsibility to continually put good out there and not be reactive and not run away, but stay in that moment and constantly seek what feels to me like it's good, and strengthen my ability to grasp larger and larger ways with a larger and larger consciousness what is actually good with a capital G. If all things came together for the good at this moment, what choice would I make in my little place? And
Can
then the
you
next moment,
can you
and
give
then
an
the next
example?
moment.
Can you give an example of that? The how this works?
Let me give a botany example because it's kind of
Hmm.
simple, and then I'll go to a anthropic example.
Okay.
Uh, so plants, and then I'll
Hmm.
get to humans. So when you look out into the canopy of the forest here in North Georgia, we're in the Appalachian, and picture yourself in the Appalachian Mountains. And trees have been growing for hundreds and hundreds of years. And it's right this moment, it is spring, and you look out into the canopy, and beneath that canopy of very, very tall trees are these very short trees that have beautiful white flowers. And if you look closely, if you sit patiently and watch the afternoon go by, you realize that that tree with the white flowers is not a tree unto itself with a particular name, but it is an example of the forest dappling.
Hmm.
That tree is, each one of those white flowers is blooming where sun dapples fall through the canopy. So the tree is not its own separate entity. The tree is a representation in a very concrete, not misplaced concreteness in that it is a separate tree, but in a true concreteness in that it is, the forest is experiencing itself at that moment and place in time that we call that tree, in the ways that this forest dapples itself over the course of the day. And so you have a tree with beautiful white blooms that are spread out and look like sun dapples. So the tree is not a tree in and of itself. The tree is a forest dappling at that moment, and again in the next moment, and again in the next moment. The blooms will fall, the leaves will come out, they'll be bright emerald green, and you know the next season, unless something happens to the tree, that it will do so again in a slightly different way, because the dapples will be slightly different, because the canopy will have changed just in its slightly ecosystem kind of way. Think about yourself as not yourself, but as the universe tammying. The universe is becoming itself at the point of ongoing time and scintillating location, that we people who like to limit things down to what we can actually grasp. The substance is called Tammy, and you're going along in life. I'm me, and you're you, and that works for the most part. It gets you your breakfast in the morning. But ultimately, you are the universe tammying through your own particular pattern, your stature in that large cosmos, cosmosing. And so if you go from the narrow, traumatized, I'm only going to be for me, through the stage of development called responsible adulthood, which you are strengthening yourself, you're finding your purpose, you are becoming productive, you are making sure that what you do pays not just for you, but for the people around you who rely on you. Expand yourself out a little bit more, and you begin to realize that you are a wise, masterful person. And your mastery comes from the Zen monk, I can't remember her name, but she says that the widest grasp of reality is the open hand. And you have become responsible enough to become patient enough to let go. So if you let go before you're responsible, you're just self-indulgent, or you're running away, or you're avoiding. And the things that you're not being responsible for are going to emerge in their own way, again, to be dealt with, because they are tangles that need to be untangled so that the world will run more toward the good. But on the far side of responsible adulthood is that open grasp that is mindful and trusting, that is in that constant dialogue with that otherness and strangeness. It feels strange to me that you are Tammy and I am Joan. If I sit patiently, however, and allow these conversations to emerge, then that point B begins to emerge. And here you are, you and I'm going to cry a minute. Oh, just a minute. You know you've hit good when you cry.
Beauty.
And this is, cry. This is acknowledgement cry, not grief cry. Acknowledging that you and I have arrived at a point B that neither of us could have even remotely and made any sense at all described, but which we were already describing on that afternoon in late July when we had our first conversation. We could not have defined it, and if we had, we would have narrowed it too much too early. But you and I had developed the strength of character, the strength of ego, of large ego, of big self, enough to know that we sensed something good in that first conversation, and we need to follow that. We don't know where it's going. Eventually the word joy came out. Eventually the idea that joy is the cause that you need to follow and not the effect that you need to try to create artificially. It's not mechanistic. And we followed the pathway, that bridge that builds itself under our feet as we walk, which sounds horrendously irrational. It's nice to believe, but yeah, no, that's not going to work. Gravity works all the time. You're going to fall into the abyss. Well, no. The reason we did not fall into the abyss by taking that next step out into a place we didn't know where we were going was that the good of the cosmos, of all the things that are trying to emerge in this new age around us, that you and I are antennas, are great big satellite dishes for, because you and I read a lot and are very concerned about trying to get people through this process and into their higher creative selves. What's different about this time is the reason why we say new age is because Carl Jaspers, the philosopher, he said that we are leaving the axial age, which came into being with all of what we call organized religions, which stretches across the board from the Mohammedan Christianity, Muslim, and Judaism, all the way over to Buddhism and Taoism. They all emerged at the same time in the blip of the cosmic time. And we've been living them out for the past 2,000 years, 2,500 years. Paul Jaspers was not a historian. He was not making a historical observation. He was a philosopher. He was making a philosophical observation. We are going from a time when we can rely on religion to tell us how to think and how to act toward the good. And we are entering into a new axial age where we have to become present to what is good and trying to emerge now. And you cannot do that by yourself, but you have to do that by yourself. And you do that by living in good faith that the good is coming in through us and doing all of the heavy lifting. All you have to do is ride it out. All that tree has to do is ride out the sundapples that cross across in the afternoon. Not only is that the simplest thing to do, to be joyful in your work, but it is the most terrifyingly difficult thing to do, is despite it all and in spite of other people laughing up their sleeves and telling you you're crazy, to be joyful in your work. Follow the good that's trying to emerge through you. And so when Whitehead wrote his Process and Reality, he was trying to answer the question, why are people so mean to women? And why did my son die? You can hear the grief of a father, and you can hear the grief of a human being who sees 51% of the human race reduced to animal status, knowing that that's not true. And he follows that thread of enjoyment is the unifying factor, not rationality. Bertrand Russell went away and made fun of Alfred North Whitehead from then on. And Bertrand Russell was lauded as the founder of analytical philosophy. And we are at the end game of analytical philosophy, which is called the International Monetary Fund. All it does is put people in poverty and keep them there. We are at the end of the age of domination, enslavement, extraction for one's own good. And we are at the beginning of an age of collaboration and emergent, allowing the abundance to emerge from within the system, not extracting from it. And we are in the age of people coming together in their vast diversity, respecting different ways of seeing the world, but also respecting when something feels good. And being able to have the depth of mindfulness and dialogue, the good, hard, loving work and safeguard that it takes to create a true Sangha, to create a true working community of people who are living into the concern for the good. And all of those skill sets are not skill sets that we've ever learned. And a lot of them are skill sets that Martin Luther King said will get you called maladjusted. But he said, I would rather be creatively maladjusted in this culture, in this day and age, than toe the line at what you call normal. I am standing up and I am calling out that normal is not good. And I know that you know that I know that you know that's not good. Putting people in the back of a bus is not good. I don't care who you are. You can justify it. but it's not good. And we are here to change the fundamental structure of how everything comes together. And that is the only holiday that I celebrate that's official on the Hallmark holiday calendar, is Martin Luther King Day, because he freed me to be conscious and aware and acknowledge and safeguard the freedoms that he was trying to put into place. He also created a culture. I was born on the day that he was buried, and I carry that as an enormous responsibility because I'm living into the future that he created. I have the freedom from being a white Southern female who has to keep her mouth shut. I don't have to do that. And I can live into a future where I can support people being who they are from the inside out, because I can also live into a future where we know how to create community now. And one of the ways we know how to create community is nonviolent direct action. And I want to point to the final example of Whitehead's work is the Women's March that happened the day after the inauguration of our president. That day was the biggest day of the first part of the 21st century, because it was a day when all concerned human beings came together around the globe. And we all saw the power of one person making one Facebook post, and within absolutely weeks, you have a wave of humanity that was larger in its population than all of the people who participated in the last great wave of human action, which was World War II. Around the globe, everybody participated in insanity. And almost exactly 100 years later, around the globe, everyone participated, whether they were there or not. They witnessed human sanity. If you want power, that's the new power. That's the Joan of Arc power. We are here and we will be heard. We don't know how, we can't tell you what, and we're all going to go back and do our own little part. But a new day has dawned.
Thank you.